Good evening. This is Rhonda from Him the Action Now. Thank you for watching. We have an awesome guest tonight to talk to us, Senator Bob Duff, the Senate Majority Leader from the Connecticut General Assembly. We're so excited to talk with him. He is definitely a partner of ours at Him the Action Now. We're going to talk about a little bit of everything tonight, including, his thoughts on the insurrection, how we're feeling as far as, some of the legislative priorities that are happening in Connecticut this session. And our Connecticut state budget. So stay tuned. It'll be an interesting and awesome talk tonight.
Let's go! Ho, ho!
Good evening, gentlemen. How are you?
Hey, how you doing?
Good. Thank you, Senator Duff, for joining. And we have our illustrious Sean Grace, our chair from Hamden DTC, our fearless leader who we love. So how are you, Senator Duff? I'm so happy to see you again.
I'm great. Thank you very much. I appreciate the invite to come back on. And as I said earlier, pardon the casualness, but I've been out shoveling just a little while ago. And it's one of those days where it's almost like a snow day, but it's 2021, so it's not a snow day anymore.
I know. It's so funny that you say that. We just got a text from the New Haven Public Schools. They're actually going to have a real snow day tomorrow, and they're not going to make the kids do remote.
Oh,
so, wow. My child was just running through the house cheering that school's really going to be closed tomorrow.
Yeah,
so, I hope they do that in Hamden. I'll make my kid shovel. I didn't touch it yet, so.
There you go. Well, considering it's Friday, they got another 3-day weekend.
Yes. So it'll be really interesting. So I'm really happy to talk to you. I wanted to talk more about the resolution of the issue that happened with you last summer with the Norwalk Police Department. And, I guess that the internal affairs found that there were no findings. So I'd love to hear more about, your thoughts of how that whole thing was resolved.
Well, I mean, the chief did a investigation, ordered an internal affairs investigation, not something I ever asked for. And, as much as I think the video evidence proves my case that they showed, and I only know what they showed publicly. I don't know what they have and they didn't show. But there's still, lo and behold, police investigate themselves and they find nothing wrong. And so, but I've never made this about me. It's about, again, the community at large and how they feel about the police department. But they have, they have some bigger fish to fry too. They just arrested 2 officers for misconduct, drinking on the job, and being caught in a hotel room, and basically not responding to calls while on duty. So they've got some soul searching to do there, as I said, over the summer, and they've got to really decide what they want to do. And the chief's got to lead and set an example.
Yeah, I mean, at some point they have to kind of bring some integrity back to their department. And I think it just they do themselves more harm than good when they don't want to really address the issues. If you continue to keep sweeping them under the carpet or excusing them all away, then where are we? Then everything becomes up for grabs.
Right. That's the whole thing, is that this is not the majority of the police in Norwalk. It's a small group, but they're unfortunately, that small group is painting the larger organization. And I think that's creating, if I were a police officer in Norwalk and doing my job and working hard serving the community, I'd be very concerned about, what is going on right now. I mean, for a state senator to feel the way I felt on that day, to have 2 officers arrested, and maybe there's other things coming up, who knows? It's a problem, and it should get resolved at the highest levels.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, speaking of which, I wanted to also ask you your thoughts on January 6th, the insurrection that happened, which we're now finding out as we get further into the investigations that, former police, current police, former military, what do you guys think about that? I mean, what do you think, Sean? I mean, we never really even talked about it.
Yeah, so it was scary. And then when we went through the process with the trial in the Senate, and we saw videos that I think many of us had never seen before, it was even scarier, if that's possible. And I think for Republicans, they want to change the subject and move on, but I think we can't do that until there's some accountability, some ownership of this. In Connecticut, in particular, I think when you look at the state party, the state Republican Party, it's almost as if this incident didn't even happen, and that's no way forward. We can't move forward like that.
Yeah, and I agree with that. It's so disheartening, and I as an American, it's an awful feeling, and as an elected official, it's downright scary to think that because some of the people there, were people that you may know and you may think that they believe in the rule of law and the Constitution the way we all do, and then on top of it, I was an intern for Chris Dodd when I was in college, and so I know those halls of Congress pretty well. I always share the story. When you're an intern, you don't get the chance to do all the glorious jobs that you like to do. But one of the things that I learned there was I learned my way around that Capitol so well that they would have me give tours to the senators' VIPs and other groups and other people. But actually, so I gave so many tours because I was good at it, like maybe one or two a day, that the security there thought that I was staff, not an intern. So they would let me on the Senate floor from time to time, and once or twice even get on the House floor. And so seeing what happened in those chambers and in the halls of those really in the historic building, just really breaks your heart, and it's just such a so devastating to what we hold near and dear to ourselves as Americans.
I mean, really, what goes on in the halls of Congress and the Senate chambers, and it's really what has held our democracy together for centuries, and for it to just be overrun in a matter of 2 hours, and having folks, and I won't forget. I had to go into the big TV into the living room and turn it on because I couldn't believe what I was watching.
Yeah, me too.
And the thing that really kind of struck me is when my daughter came in, and she's 12, and she said, "Mommy, is Richard Blumenthal there? Because we know him, right?" And I said, "Yeah." And like I saw this terror come over her face, like, "Oh no, I hope nothing happens." And I'm like, "Yeah, I hope it's not either." I just told her, I said, "I think the police and the Secret Service, they've got this under control." But I was scared for a minute about people that are our lawmakers, and I was worried for their safety. It's like I'm worried for your safety too, Senator Duff. I mean, it's very these times we live in right now are very perilous and unpredictable, sort of, because I mean nobody saw that I mean, we knew that
like that. No,
they were saying things, but nobody saw 100 police officers get injured and 5 deaths.
And these things of their own. And I know, Senator Duff, you were sworn in that day, right? Earlier that day, and in the timing of it, I think was probably good that it was done earlier, because if it had happened while everything was going on in DC, who knows, if protesters might have been emboldened in Hartford even.
Exactly.
Well, I mean, they were there. They're not as many as we thought were there, but they're actually pretty close to us, closer than I would have liked. You just never know these days. I mean, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. At this point, I think for any elected official, because it's it's between the social media, between kind of the people who think they can say whatever, and you never know when somebody says something who they're inspiring. So it may not be the person who said something. It may be somebody they've inspired.
Right.
That's why I think it's kind of this polarization, and social media has allowed people from different parts of the country who normally would not be connected to connect. It's part of our changing world and technology, but it's created that's a big negative to that.
Yeah,
Sure.
it's the radicalized language that we really grown really accustomed to listening to. And like you said, social media is such an easy platform to radicalize people because you can do it in the privacy of your own home.
Yep.
You don't have to kind of go out and meet with people, sit in, houses or, have these little secret meetings. You can just meet on a platform now and your home and Zoom or like we're in StreamYard right now, and we could have a big meeting and radicalize a whole bunch of folks and then you don't know about it all over the place from everywhere, from like California and Connecticut, and it's really, I was stunned to see so many people. I mean, it was 20,000 people out there that day.
Yeah. And that's the whole thing. I mean, Trump built that up so well for himself over the course of 2 months. And it was really a crescendo that day, and marking kind of the high point of, all the rhetoric and lies and hatefulness that he spewed. I mean, to think the fact that as, a Confederate flag went through the United States Capitol, and, you did have, people with, those plastic ties to tie people's hands up. They're talking about, "We're coming for you, Nancy," or even the vice president. I mean, none of that's okay. None of that's okay. I mean, I may disagree with Mike Pence till, the cows come home, but I don't want to see harm to the man, and, that's where I think we've got to, and that's part of the problem is that, you've got, you had two parties and you may have one that's center left, one that's center right. Maybe you fight for the middle, maybe you don't. But, you at least had two parties with ideas, and there was some common ground, there's compromise happening. And, now it's like you've got a party and then you've got kind of, what's left of a party and the ones that are running the show are the radicals, the fringe, the fringe that was always on the sidelines for a long time, but now they're the main act, they're the main circle.
Unbelievable.
And right here in Connecticut, where you see, I think, many of us know Republican elected officials. Obviously, Senator Duff, a ton of them. And, some of them maybe are, what we think of as Trump Republicans, but many, many are not. But they've been silent because they're afraid of their base. Right. And so you see the direction that the party is going. If they don't make a change, if they don't change direction, then that will just become the future of the party.
Well, I mean, that's the whole thing is, I think some of our Congress people said it really well when they're like, you've got to hold people accountable. One, you can't just move on, just because Trump's gone, you can't just move on. You gotta clean the scab and clean the wound. And rub some alcohol in there, and it's got to hurt a little bit. And that's when you start getting out the bad elements. Once you start cleaning out the wound a little bit, and then you rebuild. So yeah, will it take some time for them to rebuild? Probably, but why would you want to have a coalition as your base? Oath Keepers and the Proud Boys, the Ku Klux Klan. I mean, QAnon. Why would you want to have any of that as part of your base of your party? It's ridiculous, and it's not what either party is based on. It's not the principles of our country, and we shouldn't be running to the lowest common denominator.
Right. And they seem to be fighting over that base. I mean, I watch it now, and you have of course, Marjorie Taylor Greene. She tried to become the new Donald Trump, and that didn't work out so well for her. Right. And they're still trying to continue to kind of fight over this new fringe base, which is really interesting. That this is the base that paraded the Confederate battle flag through are the hallowed halls of the U.S. Capitol.
Yeah.
And you guys are all right with that, you know? I mean,
right. Well, that's the whole thing. I mean, I'm sorry to interrupt. Go ahead, finish your thought.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I just want to say that it's like you're absolutely right about that, and that you know, it becomes a point where it's not even like Marjorie Taylor Greene can't be the new Donald Trump because there's nobody else except Donald Trump, and it's not even a Republican Party, it's Trump's party.
Right.
And so if you're going to continue to go down that road, just know that you don't own it. It's somebody else's. And so do you want to go down, you know, somebody else's road, or do you want to create your own? And sometimes, you know, creating your own is a little more difficult because you've got to clear a new path. But you know, I would love to get back to the days where, you know, we can argue over foreign policy, or we can argue over, you know, something, and then find something where we can, you know, at least have a conversation about. But right now, there's like, you know, I don't blame President Biden about not compromising on the stimulus bill. There's no compromise there because there's nothing that they would compromise to. You know, you can't have all this, you know, all the crazy tax cuts that they did for the super wealthy, and that brings up all this debt, racks up all this debt in our country, and then all of a sudden find religion when you're trying to spend $2 trillion to help average Americans. You just look at that and you're like, there's no there's no way to find compromise when you can't even begin at the same starting line.
That's right. It seems like the whole plan is the same playbook that they've used before, prevent anything good being done to help American people. And then in the next election cycle, blame Democrats for not getting anything done.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. That is playbook.
No, I agree with that. I mean, look what they did to President Obama. I mean, he tried to get people on board, and Mitch McConnell and the rest of them were just, one, they were just pissed off that there was a black president, and two, they were just, their whole mission in life was to make him a one-term president, be damned with the country and what the country needs. So how do you work with that? You know, how do you work with that?
Yeah. And I mean, this is just my own personal opinion. I think that all of this is a referendum on Barack Obama's election and his 2 terms in 2008 and 12. I mean, I just think that the Republicans never were able to find their way after. I mean, they just were in such a lather over that. They never recovered.
I mean, doesn't the Tea Party look moderate now compared to what they have now? I mean, really, and that's saying a lot because the Tea Party's pretty, you know, they're pretty extreme as it is. And now it's like, you know, the Tea Party is now corporate or establishment, and now you've got to go to you know, this QAnon and all this other kind of stuff. Yeah.
So it's just amazing how how really fragile our democracy is.
But, you know, exactly. Let me just pivot it to, that's why we have to continue to be the party of ideas and work with people, and why, you know, as much as, you know, we all want to work together and get things done, and I think that's the right thing to do. We in a leadership vacuum, or in a vacuum of where, you know, you can have competing ideas, and you can work together to cobble out things in a pragmatic way. You've got to then just lead and do, you know, and that's what I think the Democratic Party's got to do right now. It's almost like, maybe middle school a little bit. You're going to a dance, you're going by yourself, you're hoping to find somebody to dance with, but you know, it's middle school, so you're not so sure you're going to find someone. And you know, you try to ask somebody to dance with, and they're like, no, I'm sorry, we're not going to do it. So you're like, well, I'm just gonna have to do it myself here and lead. And that's, you know, that's, I think we're going to have to do that from a policy perspective, is that we're just going to have to say, you know what, we're just going to have to go it alone. We're going to have to, you know, we're the ones who are going to raise the minimum wage. We're the ones who are going to fight for healthcare. We're the ones who are going to fight for women's rights. We're the ones who are going to fight for an America that the world respects. We're the ones who are going to be that shining, you know, hill on the city. Shining city on the hill. And we're the ones who are going to keep, peace in the world. And so if the other party is not going to be willing to engage in any of that stuff, we're just going to have to go it alone. We're just going to have to be the ones who say, this is now our job. We're the ones who have to lead. And if they're not with us, they're not with us.
I totally agree. I just think that as long as we don't start to, get in our own little squabbles and we can continue to work our issues out, I think we'll be fine. And coming back here to Connecticut, I know that there's a lot of good things, legislative priorities that are happening. You have the two that are going to be heard on Monday on voting, early voting, the constitutional amendments to early voting and no excuse absentee voting. Long overdue. So
yeah.
Go ahead.
I think that's the issue with being electronic, right? I'm sorry, I don't mean to talk over you. I apologize. Don't forget, those were put to the voters probably about 6 years ago, maybe 8 years ago. And unfortunately, the voters rejected it. And there probably wasn't enough of a campaign to get out there. I think people just because the polls have always been in favor of this. And so therefore, I think people just automatically thought they wouldn't have to work to give, to make sure that the measure passed. And then when it didn't pass, and it wasn't even close, I think people were I was surprised. So here we are again. But let me just give you two examples though. One is that, we could have had this passed had we gotten the requisite number of votes in the legislature the first go around. Mm-hmm. But we didn't, because we didn't get enough support from the other side of the aisle. So that's an issue. So again, when people think about elections and elections matter and have consequences, these are the kinds of things that we talk to people about. Is that if you want, because the Republicans fought us tooth and nail on the absentee ballot issues, they're fighting us tooth and nail on expanding voters' rights. I mean, you just look what's happening down south, and thank God for Stacey Abrams in Georgia, but other states, Alabama, all those other, Florida, Texas, the rest of them, they're not expanding voter access. They're doing the exact opposite. Where we're, as Democrats, are trying to expand voter access. It doesn't mean that they're all Democratic voters, because they're not. But it gives people more the opportunity to be able to vote. And so that's what we want to do. So it's important that we get more votes this session for this constitutional amendment to get that done. But I also say is that the Hamden DTC and others should really be on the lookout for all the bills sponsored by Republicans who are restricting voting rights. Mm-hmm. Because if you look at what's been proposed, there's quite a few of those bills out there right now. Now they'll all die; they're not going to get anywhere. But the only reason they're going to die is because we're in charge. And if they were in charge, Connecticut would be looking a lot like some of these southern states that would be restricting ballot access.
Yeah. This is what we're trying to do, with our social media platform, the Hamden DTC, Hamden Action Now, we have, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, a website, hamdenactionnow.com, where we want to make sure we try to get our information out. Because I think what happened in 2014, I think that's the last time we saw the question that was put out for statewide referendum. It wasn't really clear, and it wasn't, like you said, there wasn't a really well campaigned about it, so no one was looking for it or even knew how to answer it, including me, because I didn't even remember it until I saw it, and I was like, I think I remember that. But with COVID, the last 12 months have really changed everyone, and understanding how important elections do matter. You have to pay attention to the people who you're on that ballot. That little piece of paper has some really important people on it. And they're going to have to make some really tough decisions in tough times, like, what kind of health care, are we going to close the schools? Are we going to keep the schools open? You know, are we going to have to stand in line in the middle of a pandemic to vote in the cold, waiting to get into a locked building? you know, these
And I
are
think-
all things that are on that ballot.
Sorry.
Sorry.
No, sorry. But, you know, and I think it is such a different time, as we all recognize that, because we went through this process where by executive order, we had the ability to have no excuse absentee voting. So now, of course, there's always hiccups. There were a couple of hiccups, but by and large, it worked quite well. And I think people see that. And so hopefully that will influence how people vote on this when it's on the ballot.
Yeah. I think that the no excuse absentee ballot was just the most awesome thing ever.
It's hard to go back.
I know it's hard to go back from that. I mean, since 1986, I've been going to polls, so for me to not have to go stand up in a line or do anything like that, and I was able to fill it out on my kitchen table and go drop it at the box, it's just too cool. So I'm so looking forward to that. And I'm so happy that, the Democrats in Connecticut, and we're getting the word out. We know the hearings are on Monday at 10:30. And for those, signing up, go ahead and sign up and to give testimony. And also we put on our website and our pages a flyer with the email information on where to send your written testimony if you can't actually do both the written and the Zoom. So we're so excited about that because that, it's just even really hard for people, Black and brown folks who have to work maybe two jobs and they just don't participate because they just physically can't get there.
Right.
So
it is definitely an equity issue. And again, it expands voter access. So I would say that your two senators should be fine. I know they will be fine on this issue. But anybody who's listening to this who might have a Republican legislator, to please make sure that they do everything that they can to contact them as well. Put the pressure on them because we need, it's more than just a simple majority. It's 3/5. So we need to make sure we get people who vote for this resolution in the Senate and in the House.
So what are your thoughts about the governor's budget that just recently came out? I'm just kind of interested in hearing what you think about it.
Well, we're still going through it. So I can't say that I know everything chapter and verse. I have some, I think generally there's some things in there that are good. I think that protects some of the things that we all like. I'm very concerned about the education cost sharing formula and that freeze for 2 years. I was one of the main authors of the new funding formula and worked very hard to get that through during the bipartisan budget. And as much as I don't like the 10-year phase-in, that was the agreement we had with Republicans at the time. I would be willing to speed that up. I'm not willing to suspend it for 2 years. So that's a concern. I think we need to help our nonprofits because they have been really taking it on the chin for such a long time. There's other pieces of it that, I'm not trying to be critical, but we're just going to have to, make sure that we peel back the layers of the onion to kind of see everything that's out there. I'm very happy that it looks like we'll be getting some federal aid and significant federal aid, so we won't have to dig too hard into the rainy day fund that we have. And again, I applaud Governor Lamont on, a number of initiatives that he's put into the budget as well. I hope the gaming piece works out with the tribes so we can ratify that. The legalization of cannabis is something that I have been in favor of. I don't support homegrown, but I do support being able to, having it legalized. I mean, we've got to legalize them all around us. And it's a little, I think from a policy perspective, putting the money aside, from a policy perspective, it's bad policy not to have it legalized, considering it's legalized around us. So, and there's some who say, well, it's going to just make kids do drugs. I'm like, well, it's not like it's not already here. And if you can tax it and regulate it more than we do now, which we don't, then you have a better opportunity to be in control. And hopefully it kind of knocks the knees out of the black market. And again, it's been a failed experiment over many decades, especially how it's impacted many of our communities of color in our urban areas. So I think that we have to be thoughtful about it, but the time has come to do it, and that we should approach this in a way that makes sense from a policy perspective, and that that does it in a way that is very inclusive for all of our residents.
I totally agree. I didn't really have an opinion on, legalizing cannabis until I thought about it. And I said, I hope that there is going to be some way that they can let folks out of prison and also clear the records of people who have those types of arrests, especially the records, because that is just devastating to try to find housing, try to find a job. It's just devastating. So, if we, while we make a whole bunch of money, which I know we're going to, that's part of it, but also to clear people's records who, don't have to have this, history on following them around. It's like, shackles forever that they can't. I mean, I've been in housing for so long and we've denied people, subsidized housing and Section 8 housing over the course of the years because of these little simple things on their record. So I hope I haven't really looked into it really thoroughly, but I hope that becomes a part of it.
Yeah, that's the thing, right? For white people, it's essentially always been legal, right? When you look at who gets held legally accountable for, even though white people use marijuana every bit as much as any other group, when you look at who actually suffers legal consequences, it's disproportionate. And so even if there wasn't a revenue component to this, it's something that we should do for that reason alone.
Yeah,
exactly.
As Senator Duff pointed out, it's been available. I think there's probably no one that actually wanted to get marijuana that couldn't get it. It's widely available and has been.
Right. I said to somebody, I could probably get it. I know I can get it 2 miles away from my house, and I could probably get it at least 3 or 4 doors down from me. I mean, you just, it's not hard to get, and so, that's why when I mentioned, you asked me the question, Rhonda, about marijuana, I did not really bring up the money issue, because it's really, as you eloquently said, there's so many other pieces to this policy that are important. And Sean, you said the same thing too. And so that's why, you've got to be thoughtful about how you go about this. And it's got to be an inclusive proposition for folks, because, we've done a lot of work over the years, and we're a national leader. We never pat ourselves on the back. Everybody always, never really seen us, people in the state always kind of rank on our own state. People are freezing right now in Texas, and they probably still think Texas is the best state in the union, And here in Connecticut, we've done so many good things, and people always love to yell and talk about how awful it is. But we live in a great state, and we've done a lot of good things. One of the things that really people don't look at so much is what we've done on homelessness and eliminating chronic homelessness and veterans homelessness. What we've done on criminal justice reform over the years that were really tough votes, but were the right thing to do. That's lowered crime. I mean, heck, the governor's he's closing 2 prisons down in his budget. I mean, one we knew, which was the Max facility, and then he's closing another prison. I mean, that stuff saves tens of millions of dollars a year. Plus, on top of it, we've diverted people away from prison who are nonviolent offenders, who then hopefully can get the treatment and help that they need and become productive members of society. They can live in a house, they can live in housing, they can, get a job, they can have a family, they can pay taxes and be with the rest of us, run for office, do whatever. So, I think that's kind of what we want to see.
I think also another part of the cannabis bill that we were talking about earlier was, I think there's a clause in there that says that employers still would have the right to deny employment for those, certain employment because of, I think we just lost him. He'll come back in. But yeah, that's a concern for me, so, I mean, if there's still some employers out there that say, oh, sorry, you still wouldn't be entitled to have this job. It's still is it still
Is
legal?
it based on a record, or do you mean like through testing or
Testing? Yeah. Like when you have to go for a drug test for a job.
Yeah. That part has to be figured out for sure, and I know that like when you talk about transportation industry, there is I believe some federal component to that as well.
Mm-hmm.
So they have to figure that out in terms of, what level of, I guess it was a THC that's in your bloodstream,
Right.
what level is a safe level, because, things like alcohol leave your system relatively quickly. But THC, long after the effects are done, it can still linger in your bloodstream. And so, does that mean someone who, smoked marijuana on the weekend and it's still lingering in their bloodstream? How does that impact them if they're tested, in transportation industry or something like that? So it's complicated,
Yes. I'd brought up the question, Senator Duff, that I think there was some language or some talk about how some employers were still going to reserve the right to say that you have to not be a marijuana user in order to be, work at their job, at their company. And that's, again, something we're going to probably have to figure out because, again, the Black and brown community, because of all of the, segregation and all the things economically, that we're really an income sensitive culture and subculture. So, if we're not able to make the job or earn the income, we don't have a lot of wealth. We don't inherit a lot of wealth. We don't possess a great deal of wealth. So jobs are so important. So I hope that gets looked at because, again, if it's going to be legal, then it needs to be completely legal, including not to prevent you from being able to work.
Yeah, no, I hear you on that. I think that's a larger discussion because there are some jobs, obviously, where you don't want to have people who are high or using any kind of drugs or alcohol. But you also want to make sure that we're not using it as a discriminatory tool in some ways as well. So those are always the nuances to the policy.
Yeah.
And that's part of, I think that is part of a discussion to have on how do we effectively keep people safe. We don't want to have teenagers driving down the road, smoking a joint. It's not that they may not do that already.
Right.
In some cases, we don't want to have people who are delivering UPS or FedEx or anything, driving people to the airport or, even in an office scenario, because, there's important functions in an office or a bank or something like that. But you've got to make sure that it's not one of those things where people say, okay, well, today's your random test. And if you've had it in your system from over the weekend, you're gone. So again, I think we've got to, somebody who follows this a little closer than I do will have to come up with a good idea on that one.
Yes. So what are your thoughts on the legislation that's on the table this year on racism being a public health crisis just on a state level?
I support that because it if you read history and how a lot of us and I grew up in a diverse city and so I in a lot of ways I'm so glad that I did and on a number of levels, and I think that I was more prepared for the world, and I'm glad my kids live in the same city and it's more diverse than it was even when I was there. But you really don't learn a lot of things that a lot of pieces of history were not taught to us in school, and there's a lot of learning to do for all of us. So when you ask about is racism a public health issue, the reason I say it is because, in my opinion, we have not done enough to teach ourselves or be taught in school or even anywhere about how systemic racist policies are in our nation, and how it has impacted people in so many ways that are subtle and not so subtle. Some are, in your face, like not being able to vote, or a drug conviction. There was a man who in Philadelphia, he just got out of jail. He's like 85 years old, and he's been there since he was 15, and he was an accomplice to what was a violent crime. Nobody could pin him as being the perpetrator to the violent crime, and he had a life sentence. And I don't think anything like that would. I don't know that anything like that would go today because of Supreme Court decisions, but those are kind of systemic issues that people don't really talk about, over time. And so when we think about that, we think about how housing was discriminatory, for decades, and it was discriminatory by actions of the federal government and state governments, and how mortgages were discriminatory, and how other types of laws that would not allow people of color to be able to advance themselves, or intentionally trip them up so that they could not advance. So and I'm probably not being as eloquent as I would like to be on this, but in all those instances, we have a lot of learning to do and an awakening to have. And so I think you can only have that awakening and that conversation if you have almost, you put it under that umbrella of this is a public health emergency. I mean, any of the statistics about, Black women who, have more serious health conditions than anybody else, or incomes that are less. And if you have a lower income doing the same job, you can't afford same types of things that somebody else could. Or if you go to the hospital as a Black woman, doctors don't believe you, because they may somebody who looks like me. And if you get pulled over by the police, how are you treated, and how what is your path after that? Even if you may not have even done anything. So that's, to me, that's part of the reason why you have to make that declaration, because then once you make that declaration, I think that sends a message of, we're going to have this discussion. It's not going to be an easy one, and it may not happen all at one time, and it may not happen in 1 year. But if we say that this is our goal to fix some of these systemic problems over time, then I think that helps us to, that's a guiding principle to get us there.
I agree.
That's a long answer.
It's so good that you said that in your early part of your comment. You said, basically, we have to acknowledge that there is a problem, and that, I'd kind of even raise you and say that I think that as long as the Black and brown community, the ones to define what the problem is, because we, really, if we say, racism today in 2021 is the same as the 1960s, but it's the things that we see that we were so horrified about. If you watch video from YouTube, and I do that a lot, and watch video from the 1960s and 50s, and really the brutality of it, it's still the same thing. We're still there. It's just not as brutal, and it is more institutional and structural, and the things like that are more cultural that we really, it's just so baked in now. But I still think that the devastating effects are still there, and so we're never really believed by it, because if there's not a lynching or a cross being burnt on my lawn, people will say, "Oh, what are you talking about? You're making this up. You're creating the problem." But I really appreciate that you're saying that these items are, kind of sort of like woven into our culture. And because of that, it seems like progress is stalling. And then obviously January 6th, progress took a big leap backwards, because we see that, as much progress as we believe that we have made, how much have we really made when you can parade the Confederate battle flag proudly through, as long as with all the other flags and all the statements and all the things that were made. I mean, clearly we haven't made as much progress, and that was a great call to action, I think, for everybody in our country, that is evidence that we have so much more progress to make. I think naming it and calling it, a public health crisis says, yes, it affects every area of our lives, everything.
And when we have, other crises like the pandemic we're going through now, then it really puts a spotlight on that long-standing issue. And so you see, I believe CDC had just come out with statistics showing that life expectancy for African Americans
Went down.
in this past year went down by 3 years. Astonishing, right? And it was already lower than for white Americans to begin with. And white Americans went down a little bit as you'd expect in a health crisis like this, but African American life expectancy went down at, like 3 times as much. And I think it's not just having to do with COVID, it's, all causes of death. And so our health systems are under stress, and folks that have been suffering all along now are bearing the brunt of that. And you look at the rates of vaccination among African Americans is much lower than other populations, and some of that has to do with access, and so it has to be recognized.
Well, think of all the kids who are in special education, who are not white. And, even growing up, I saw that a lot. So again, Ron, as you said, all these things account for public health. I would argue, when you put kids in special ed because they're different or they have a behavioral issue, that's a public health issue. Because you are almost sending these kids into dead ends.
Yeah. Yes. And I just, when we think about, life, I like I said, I always, Robin DiAngelo's books and her talks are always really good for me. And she says, from the cradle to the grave, I always, envision racism as like this little mist, this cloud that descends over you from birth. And, you can't get out of it. Like it affects everything. I just was hearing today that, Black women and Black and brown women are dying at childbirth at an alarming rate. And I think about my challenges with my birth of my daughter. And I fully believe, because I was in a major hospital in Boston and my OBGYN was a Black female, is the reason why I'm still alive today. Because she absolutely left no stone unturned with technology to make sure my daughter and I survived my very emergency C-section. So, again, it all based on the care and who you're getting it from. And that's one problem. Then you have, a job problem. Then you inherit the economic problem of not being able to inherit wealth because of the generations before us that were not allowed to own land. And then not even owning the land, even being able to be a part of the economic system, which just brings a whole nother piece of the pie that is a big piece, the economic piece. So it's just, there's so much. And you really can't, it's got to be taught from the word through the prism of a Black person's perspective, Black and brown. I just cringe when I go to meetings and they have white folks running the diversity meeting or the diversity training. Just like, are you kidding? Really? So I hope we get to the point in 2021 going on after what we've had to go through with COVID and the insurrection and Donald Trump to start listening to the Black and brown voices and let us speak our truth and be our authentic selves. So, and not be offended and have their feelings hurt, and, don't take it personally. It's just how we feel, and maybe we might be able to make a little progress. I'm hoping.
Yeah, I mean, I think I think those are good points, and the good news is that our kids are growing up in a much more diverse world, you know, and so they I think in some ways it's almost like, you know, they're born with a phone in their hand, and it's just common to them. So I hope in you know, I look at my kids, and you know, I think their perspectives in some way, a lot of ways, are probably different from mine because of how they grew up and who they grew up with and what they were exposed to. Not to say that there's not, you know, learning for them to go on. I think for my generation, it's you know, which was a little more diverse, but not quite. We've got to have these conversations. We've got to listen, and it's going to take time, because you have to have people who are willing to listen. And you know, I fear sometimes that people want to have great conversations, and then when they hear something that they don't want to hear, it just shuts down. Mm-hmm. And so we've got to make sure that we're all willing to listen, so that you can be authentic and you can talk about your perspective, and that, you know, we can learn about, you know, and you know, something I had never thought of before. It's almost like, you know, with the police accountability bill, of having unconscious bias training. It's so important to have that. I mean, you can't serve a community if you're only looking at things from one perspective. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, do I hope that one day maybe that's not necessary? I hope. I don't know that ever will be, because we all have our own bias, who we are, what we are, because of the way we've grown up. But I certainly hope that we have the ability to have frank conversations, that people can be authentic, and that you know, we're so much stronger when we have diverse input. I mean, you look at I think they had a study that showed diverse boards of companies versus homogeneous boards of companies. The diverse boards were so much more productive and had better bottom lines than the ones that were homogeneous. We can, I mean, you know, we've done almost done, well, I know we've done this to ourselves, and we can do so much better, and there's so much potential there. So I don't want to be the guy lecturing about that, but I just think that there's a lot we can do as an elected.
I agree. Well, thank you so much it's almost 8 o'clock, and I want to keep you any longer. I know you have other things to do. You're very
busy. Shovel.
You got to go shovel. I'm sure your wife is like, please go shovel the driveway.
No, I just, before I go, can I just say thank you for all your support, and for all the work you all do in Hamden, and for bringing me on a couple times to have these conversations. I mean, I really enjoy them, and I learn a lot from you all, and I appreciate your activism and your work and your help. And, you know, the more you do, the easier it is to do my job, because when we have a more informed, active electorate, we can get the things done that we need to get done. So I just really want to take the time to say thank you, and for giving me this opportunity also to you know, speak in a way that's, you know, not in sound bites, but having a real conversation. It really means a lot.
Well, we appreciate you 100%. And you are amongst, you're like a Hamden Action Now partner. You're like a 45-minute away family member. So, you know, but we will, anytime you need any support for your legislative priorities, you know, that you just give us a call, send me an email or text, and we will always support you. And we just look forward to all the really good things we're going to continue to do to break down all these barriers in our state. And, you know, things that just have been just a part of, you know, the nature of things. We're just going to continue to expose them and tear them down. So we're going to do it all together.
Let's do it together.
So thank you so much, and enjoy the rest of your evening. And please don't hurt your back with the shovel.
No. Yeah. Thank you both.
Good night.
Take care.
Take care. Bye.